Hello and welcome to the Drawing Room Experts. This is Zaib. Hope you guys are doing well. After a couple of weeks of tag teaming with a couple of my friends, Sahir and Farooq, I'm back doing a solo one, and it feels kind of weird when you're not in the habit of things to record by yourself. And I know podcast releases have been quite uh, infrequent because I have so much going on work wise and other things that couldn't find time to record. But then also, I mean, I didn't find anything worth talking about either. And maybe because I was just too busy with other things that I didn't notice, might be things that I would have had opinions on, which I didn't because I didn't know about them. Similarly, about this particular episode is about something that is quite fresh. It's a new addition um, to my list of things that I like, and it is an interesting journey that I've been on. Sometimes actively and sometimes passively. But I wanted to share that with you guys. So today we're talking about professional wrestling, and I've already done one episode on professional wrestling, but not the wrestling part of it, but the music part of it. And that was an episode I really enjoyed talking about, different entrance themes of professional wrestlers that I feel like are the best. And I think I may have rated them. Did I rate them? I'm not sure, but I can put like a suggestions video suggestions. Actually, you know what? I didn't do videos back then. I only did audio audio podcasts. I can put up the link to the WWE episode up on Spotify and Google Podcasts, and it's a good time to just remind you guys follow and subscribe on Google, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and of course, if you're watching me on YouTube, that would be really really appreciated. But yeah, I did that one episode, but that mostly focused on the music part of it, but not the business part of it, which is what I wanted to talk about today. Not so much from a business perspective, like business, but more from a consumer perspective, because like so many of you, I'm sure I grew up watching wrestling. Um, Earliest memories that I have of WWE, which was WWF back in the 90s and late 90s until it changed to WWE. The earliest memory that I have of wrestling is when me and my brother, Zan, who has featured on this podcast a couple of times, um, me and my brother would go and watch wrestling with my cousin Danish, who I've yet to feature, but he's more than a brother. Um, but and I remember watching Yokozuna wrestle Bret Hart, and this is I'm aging myself. I mean, I'm 33, so I think it's mid 90s if I'm not mistaken. I don't quite remember exactly when it was, but we were like, I don't know, 8 9 or something, or maybe younger. But whenever that big match happened between Bret Hart and Hitman um, Hitman Hart and Yokozuna, we watched with complete attention. And back then we didn't know about like storylines and heels and baby faces, but it was just for the art, just for the entertainment piece of it. We watched, and I remember that overhead suplex that um, Bret Hart gave to Yokozuna during the game, during the match. And I was like, wow, this is unbelievable for a guy, with the physique of a Bret Hart, pick up someone with the physique of Yokozuna and over the head and gave that suplex. I remember, so that was really thrilling. And then the years went by, and I think generally I've had like an on and off relationship with the WB and professional wrestling for that matter. But on came the late 90s and early 2000s. Um, I started watching wrestling much more religiously. I watched Raws on Monday and SmackDowns on Tuesdays, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they've changed Raw and SmackDown to different days now. I think Raw is still Monday, but I think SmackDown's like Friday night or something. Um, but it was Raw and it was the Attitude Era. And of course, you have to watch the Attitude Era. If you're a fan of professional wrestling, that was probably the prime of professional wrestling at the time. And back then, it was 10 Sports as a channel. I don't know if it's still on Pakistan. I'm pretty sure it probably is, giving some cricket games here and there. But 10 Sport used to televise WWE, Raw, and SmackDown at the time. And it was quite late in the game when we got internet and computer at home when we realized that Raw and SmackDown that we were watching on telly was like, I think, a few weeks late. Like it was delayed broadcast. So if something had happened on Raw, which we saw on 10 Sports, um, I think in real time they probably reached the pay-per-view dates, right? So it was quite odd for me to just see and basically get all the results of the games and the matches prior to watching Raw and SmackDown. Um, and the thing that I really loved most about WB at the time and the Attitude Era and the post Attitude Era, early parts of the post Attitude Era, when you had, the likes of Brock Lesnar stepping up, and even the early years of John Cena. Um, the thing that I really enjoyed more than the in ring wrestling matches was the storyline, the promos that the wrestlers would cut, like going up on stage, talking shit about your opponent, or really engaging with the crowd, being the bad guy or the good guy, whatever, right? That one on one, those pure storyline moments, those pure dramatic acting moments, if you like, right? Not the wrestling part. Um, that I enjoyed more than the wrestling bit. It's the wrestling is kind of like, um, I think nothing surprises you after a certain stage, right? Because there's certain moves they'll all do. Maybe the physicality of something like the Bret Hart and Yokozuna moment, or one moment that springs to my mind is that suplex off of the top rope on Big Show by Brock Lesnar, which resulted in the ring collapsing. Um, Something like that obviously does interest you, or the more iconic that Hell in a Cell, match between the Undertaker and Mankind, when I think the Undertaker gave Mick Foley chokeslam off the top of the steel cage, and the Hell in a Cell matchup. So stuff like that, right? Really, catches your attention or keeps, you occupied. But I think generally just the way the game starts, the match starts, it's a lot of like feeling each other out, and then there's just like it's like a dance, right? So you after a certain point you realize, okay, it gets a little dull and boring. But very few games I remember, very few matches I remember that are still fresh in my memory. One comes to mind. I think the last one that I really really enjoyed was, it was a random game match on. I keep calling it game for some reason, but anyway, the random match on Raw, Monday Night Raw, which was Shawn Michaels versus um, this other wrestler. I'm forgetting the name of. He was quite athletic. He was not one of the more prominent ones. I don't. So apologies if I'm forgetting um, it to be a very common name, but I think Shelton Benjamin, something like that. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was the guy. So Shawn Michael had a random match between him and Shelton Benjamin, if that's the right name. Um, you know what? Why am I sitting in front of a computer and wondering? Just give me 1 second. Shelton Benjamin. Yeah, that was Shelton Benjamin. Wow. Good, good, impressive memory. So it was Shelton Benjamin, and both Shelton Benjamin and Shawn Michaels. I think that match was fantastic. I remember that. I think the climax of the whole match was Shelton Benjamin jumping off of um uh the top rope, but not on the turnbuckle, just the top rope, trying to like uh maybe like hit Shawn Michaels with a flying kick or something, jumps off of the top rope out from outside the ring, and Shawn Michael catches him on the switch in music. I think that was brilliant, brilliantly executed. I still remember that sound, like goes right into his face, and obviously Shawn Michael ends up winning the match. But yeah, stuff like that really, lives in your memory longer. But what lives in my memory more are the altercations, the mics, the banter, or uh, the talking shit, the promos. And as I was watching WWE, I think the promos kind of really died down, right? Because there weren't really good people who could talk shit on the mic in the Attitude Era. I remember The Rock, obviously, Stone Cold, Chris Jericho, even Triple H to an extent. Shawn Michaels was really good at it too. Um, who am I missing in the Attitude Era? Um, yeah, I think these guys, and then probably some more I'm forgetting. But then after the post Attitude Era, you had the likes of general manager Eric Bischoff was really really good. And who else? I mean, Vince McMahon was really good at talking shit on the mic. On the mic, he was really good, demanded a lot of attention. Um, Chris Jericho, as I mentioned, and I think Brock Lesnar was never good on the mic, so which is why they had him, tagged with or looped in with Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman is master on the mic. I watch him sometimes, even now. If I happen to stumble upon a video of him talking, I really enjoy to hear him. In the middle of the ring, he's amazing. So the names became far, fewer down the line post the Attitude Era, and that's why I kind of lost interest. Um, John Cena in his earlier years was pretty good with the mic, but then became childish and unbearable, to be honest. So it was not really exciting, the wrestling business for me. And I think post 2004 or five, um, the Undertaker was decent and a half. I would say he was not the best, but he was decent and a half. Even the badass American phase that he had, American badass phase, um, he was okay. Well, but it wasn't unbearable. He was I could listen to him, but wasn't my favorite. Um, but yeah, as soon as that kind of like faded away, it just lost. I just lost interest, right? And then on came this guy, and this is where the story kind of turns, right? Turns on its head in terms of me coming back to professional wrestling, and I'll get to that later. But this guy comes in. He's a hell of a wrestler. So I've watched his matches, watched his matches. So he really keeps you engaged if you're watching him wrestle on the mic. He is arguably, I think, better than even Stone Cold, I would say, because Stone Cold was monotonous, right? Stone Cold was a lot of like one-liners, Steve Austin says so, whatever, something like that. He couldn't go on a long monologue and still keep you engaged and interested in what you had to say. But this dude, um, best I would say in the world, no pun intended, to what he actually calls himself. And I'm talking about CM Punk, and that's where I got sucked back into wrestling. I think 2011 or 12 or something like that, and I started watching a lot of his promos, and I started watching him wrestle, started watching and following his storyline, and then life happened, and I forgot watching, about it. And then I think 2014 or 15, I happened to stumble upon this promo, which he actually cut, I think, around that time, I'm assuming, on Raw, as he um, was scheduled to wrestle John Cena for the WWE Championship, of course. I think the early part of 2010s, that decade of the last decade, was dedicated to everyone fighting John Cena for the title, and John Cena ended up winning most of those games. Um, Again, predictability, kind of like it just lost interest. Um, so this guy, CM Punk, scheduled to wrestle um, um, John Cena in a couple of weeks, drops one of the biggest, if not the biggest, promos in the history of this profession. And as I was listening to it back then, like for the first time, I still remember goosebumps. I was like, whoa. It was an 8 minute long or something, 10 minute long rant on towards the end of the show on Raw. So backstory, of course, was CM Punk had issues with the management. His contract was due to expire pretty soon. After the title match, he was supposed to be out of contract, but Vince McMahon, being the genius that he is, realized that, oh, you had issues with that. Let's just use that as a ploy. Yes, just use that as business. So of course, anyone who thinks that CM Punk actually went there, and that mic cut after 8 minutes, that was of course that was planned. But the ideas behind what he said were all true. He actually felt those. He had those issues with the management at the time, and they said, okay, why don't we use this as part of the storyline? And he goes on to this amazing rant, which was the voice of a lot of WB fans, including myself at the time. And when, we felt like, likes of John Cena were being, branded in a certain way, which is not really Attitude Era. It was just, and it was the Attitude Era turned up on its head. So he cuts this promo. I become an instant fan. And I was like, I am following this guy wherever he goes. Of course, he ends up signing with WB after the championship match. He actually wins the game, leaves the company for 3 weeks until he makes his amazing return with a theme that he still uses to this day, the Cult of Personality. And I one of my guilty pleasures up on YouTube is to watch like wrestlers making returns. So like Chris Jericho, sometimes, I watch his return, like if he's out for 6 months or whatever, and then he makes a comeback, right? Those comeback videos really are amazing. But the key is that they should have the entrance music hit. I don't like the comebacks where the guy jumps up from the crowd and then it's a comeback. Those are, I get it, more adrenaline filled and it's kind of exciting, but I think the whole stage setting of a return is much more exciting to me personally, where you have the theme music hit and then the guy walks out, the crowd goes wild. That is what I enjoy the most. But anyway, I digress. He ends up sticking with WB, and then a few years down the line, he ends up leaving the company. And I, again, as a person who's been following him for a lot of these years, I listened to a lot of his podcasts where he aired those grievances with the company, with Triple H as the leading guy, right, with Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon, obviously, stepping away and having his what he called doofus son-in-law and daughter in that promo that I was talking about, run the company, and those were like fair criticisms that he had of the company, ranging from storyline gaps and not really picking up pure wrestlers to really taking them to the top, sticking with ass kissers. And then also the safety part of it as well, right? Because these guys put their bodies on the line. They need recuperation time. They need to be pampered from a health perspective and not really have them treated like gladiators in the fucking Rome, right? So having them really crumble their mental health and physical health to the ground. So all of these issues were valid, of course. He ends up suing the company and kind of like wins one of the cases he filed against WB. But throughout this time, the legend of CM Punk kind of grew, whenever WB shows went to Chicago, there's only one guy they talked about. There was only one guy the whole crowd was screaming about, and that was CM Punk. And it was kind of awkward for WB to hear that because they can't blur or mute the crowd noise, right? They're chanting CM Punk at the top of their lungs, even when The Rock is there, in one of those shows. So nothing really, not really helps them forget that, oh, CM Punk is no longer part of the company, and it's kind of an awkward elephant in the room situation going on. So that legend of CM Punk kind of grew, and he went to UFC. Didn't really work out for him over there. And then there was a push for him to come back to WWE. And of course, he was never going to go back because, he had issues with the people working there at the time. He had some commentary stints with other companies. He had a show on Fox commentating on WWE, which was kind of strange, but he was not working with WWE, he was working with Fox Sports. So that kind of arrangement kind of worked for him until a few weeks ago. He makes a magnificent, triumphant, hairs on your neck raising, return to professional wrestling as part of AEW. Now, this is where the game changes for me, and this is where my interest in professional wrestling is back at its peak. Of course, I'm following the guy I watch on Twitter or something. He makes his return, and I'm like sucker for returns. And then this is CM Punk returning to professional wrestling after 7 years. Never gonna miss that. Watched the whole thing, maybe watched a few times. It was just so amazing. Watch him cut another fantastic promo. Watch the crowd really sing the anthem, like his entrance music theme with the music being played. I mean, even louder. It was just an amazing atmosphere. If anyone's interested in watching Returns and why I love them, should watch that one. When CM Punk made his return to AEW a few weeks ago. AEW obviously owned by Shahid Khan's son, Tony Khan. Tony, I know from ownership of Fulham Football Club in the Premier League, so I know I had not interaction with him, but interaction with his name and what he does, and I knew about the guy. Obviously, I'd heard about AEW before CM Punk joined. I think when Chris Jericho joined a few years ago. I think it was one of the first big signings that they had. But again, I was done with professional wrestling as a brand. I was like, it's not, I don't know, I'm never going to go in. Until CM Punk joined, I am interested. I'm interested in how AEW is run. I'm interested at how the storylines are being written. I'm interested I'm intrigued by this new talent that AEW has, like Darby Allin, and I just watched Kenny Omega the other day. That guy can talk on the mic too. So a lot of these guys are really good on the mic, and that's as I said, one of the key things I really really enjoy about the professional wrestling as a product. So to have all of that, and CM Punk on top of that, it was just too good for me. So my immediate, I would say, reactions to me starting to follow. I haven't still watched AEW like I used to. Of course, time doesn't permit me to do that, but I'm still like catching up on highlights and games matches, and promos, and of course CM Punk. And anything CM Punk does, I have to watch that and pay attention to it. So I think the talent is number one that I really enjoy about AEW. The talent is really, really good, exciting talent, new people. So I'm kind of excited about like finding out about these new guys, right? And then I think the way the company is run, you have Adam Cole, by the way, who I absolutely love now as well. I didn't know he was so big in the underground, not even underground, like pro wrestling circles. But I knew about him only when he joined AEW. I think a week or so after CM Punk joins. And again, fantastic with the mic, that guy, Adam Cole. And, these guys are, all of these guys, when they were joining, even CM Punk, he doesn't really hold back. He speaks his mind. So I trust him. a lot of the themes were that they really enjoy working with Tony, and Tony is kind of like that. He's a young guy, Tony. I think probably in his 30s, even probably my age. I don't know, but he's a billionaire's son, of course. So he's able to run this massive organization. Um, but I digress again. But I think what I was saying was that a lot of these guys enjoy working with him because he really empowers the wrestlers. He really involves them in the storylines, and there's a lot of safety protocols. I think that was the one thing that CM Punk really cared about, and the wrestlers seem to enjoy working there. So that joy kind of like trickles down onto the viewer, I would say, or the consumer, and I really enjoy watching that. So that's one thing. The other thing was the crowd. I mean, WWE crowds. I don't know. I haven't watched WWE in a while. By the way, they're gonna be here in the Bay Area. I think in October or something. And my wife was asking if I would want to go, and I was like, nah, I'm not interested. If AEW was here, I would definitely go. But the crowd is the highlight, I would say, of AEW. The way they really, really engage with the wrestlers, especially as I mentioned that CM Punk entrance music theme that they sing pretty much every time it gets played, and then Adam Cole, I thought I saw that return or introduction to AEW was amazing. So yeah, I think it sounds like a really startup-y, hip, but really solid project, this AEW thing. And they did beat WWE Raw in ratings a few weeks ago. So that's the tide is turning. Daniel Bryan, who's now Brian Danielson on AEW, joined the company as well. He's well known to be one of the best wrestlers out there. Um, and there's murmurs about others joining as well. So, but it's not just that. It's not their AEW hasn't relied on these big names to join and give them the legitimacy that they so eagerly wanted, but it's more on the shoulders of their own talent that they've groomed and really brought up, like Darby Allin and Kenny Omega. But yeah, that was what I that that's something that has been exciting me for a while, and I wanted to talk about it. So Mick Foley released like a short video, I think right after CM Punk joined or so, or I think maybe after Brian Danielson joined, saying that WWE has a problem because if talent is preferring to go and work in AEW as opposed to WWE, that really raises question marks. And I think it's overall it's going to be better for the industry because WWE has enjoyed they have enjoyed monopoly for years on years, and that's why they get away with anything, right? Um, and to this day, they're kind of like relying on people like Brock Lesnar, who is an unbelievable athlete. Trust me, and I enjoy watching him too. But the thing is, if you're going to bring him on like one time, one show a month, or maybe a couple of shows a quarter, that's not worth it. That's not worth it. Me following the whole storyline from scratch. So whenever they're kind of in deep shit, they have Brock Lesnar come in or Goldberg come in, who's at I heard he's back again, or The Rock will do one of those promos and is gonna. It's just not interesting anymore. It's so predictable. It's so lame almost. JR is on AEW. Who wouldn't love that? I mean, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, listening to JR and Jerry was amazing. So having to hear him, and Taz, by the way, is there too in AEW. So a lot of these guys kind of like, from a commentary perspective, like soothe you in that transition that you have from WWE to AEW is not that difficult because you have these voices that you've heard before and they transition you in pretty well. And then you have these faces as well, some of these faces. But yeah, I would highly advise whoever is a fan of professional wrestling, go and watch AEW. It's up on TNT here in the United States. I don't know about other parts of the world, but I'm sure Pakistanis can figure something out if they want to watch anything. But yeah, that's the episode for today. Again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you watched this far. I mean, come on, just hit the button. Really appreciate it. And follow us on the audio platforms like Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, um, and also on Audible. If anyone listens to me through that. Um, um, until next time, we'll come back with another one. Cheers. Thanks, guys.